entrepreneurship is a trauma response, and I don't think there's a truer statement that's been made around entrepreneurs in the world. It doesn't make what they've done bad. It doesn't make it disingenuous. It doesn't make it dishonest. What it makes it is that it's coming from an origin that most of them don't even realize that this is where it's come from.
You're watching the LeanScaper podcast, where landscapers come to grow. If you want the systems, stories, and strategies to build a lean, mission-driven company that your team loves working for, keep watching. Philip, welcome to the LeanScaper podcast. I'm really honored to have you today.
Yeah, great to be here, Benji. Thank you for inviting me on.
There's a sentence on your website. I'm going to read it to you, okay? Mindset and intellect have brought you to where you are today, to whatever goal you aspired to achieve. Yet, upon reaching this milestone, you may find it doesn't feel as fulfilling as expected. You may feel misaligned, unfulfilled, or even disconnected. And that really grabbed me when I read that, and I thought maybe we'd start there. Can you just explain the deeper truth behind that?
Wow. Okay, we are diving right in. I just got off a call within the last 40 minutes or so with a very talented golfer. And I don't share that to try to impress the audience. You are the audience. But we actually talked about this very thing. And he has realized that actually all the practice in the world and all the strategies and all the tricks and the tips, the intellectual things and the visualizations has only allowed him to go so far in his career. And what he has recognized, as I've seen over the years, is that when any professional athlete is going down, the last stretch, if you like, and they're going down the 18th in a golf context, and they're trying to stay really focused, it's actually the absence of thought is actually what keeps them in flow. It's the absence of thinking. It's actually when they describe it, people say, oh, they had a great mindset, they were controlling their thoughts, they were thinking the right thing. They weren't actually thinking at all. So to me, the intellect has been given this, put on a pedestal, and we have given way too much credence to the mind and to the intellect. And to me, soul set is how we describe in terms of intuition, emotion, feeling. And I feel that a lot of people have set out with intentions and goals and aspirations from a very intellectual place. My wife included. She was an accountant. She grew up in a poor environment. Her career guidance person said, you're really good with numbers. Why didn't you become an accountant? Very intellectual series of decisions and data. She became an accountant to turn out that she's the worst accountant in the world. Not because she's shit with numbers, it's because it made her miserable. And she basically made that. It was all intellectual data that she used to make that decision. Now she's stepping into coaching and supporting men and women. Never imagined that was a gift she had. And now she has joy, meaning, and significance in her life where accounting was never going to bring that to her.
She had reasoned her way towards a goal that upon completing or making some meaningful progress towards it, it dawned on her that this is not it. You said something there, like setting out on goals from a very intellectual place. Is that a pretty common thing that you observe? What does that mean? Just unpack that idea for us.
Well, again, I'll just give you an example. I literally got off the call to this guy and I said, why do you play golf? And he said, I play golf because I'm good at it. And I said, I'm sorry, that's not enough. It was my first call with him, first call. And we may or may not engage. But I said, that's not enough. And he looked at me and he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, you've got to play for a bigger reason. You've got to play for a deeper purpose. Because when it comes to a tough day in the office or a tough week or a tough year, you've got to be able to dig into a deeper well that you may not even know you have inside of you. You were talented. And I understand that's a reason to pursue something, but it's not a reason to necessarily pursue something and be successful and have significance and have satisfaction and meaning and everything else and purpose behind it. So to me, we get applauded in society for what it is that we do from a talent perspective. We get put on a pedestal, we get applauded, we get rewarded financially for it. But often there's these other things in our lives, these things that we can express and show ourselves in the world, these gifts that we have that we go to our grave with our greatest gifts still inside of us. And yet we're executing our talents every single day.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about these retreats, a brief kind of overview of your work? I know it's broad and vast, and you work with a ton of different people, but talk about like the retreats, who comes to them, where do they happen, and if we can weave it in as well, a little bit about this soul set process that you mentioned a minute ago.
Yeah, for years I've run retreats all over the world, as far away as India, Guatemala, Peru, various different parts of the world. But in more recent times, most of the deeper immersive experiences are happening in Ireland, in a castle on the west coast of Ireland, because the earth here, the land, the landscape is just so profound that if you just walk to the landscape here, it can be enough to to shake something loose inside of you. Layer in beautiful, meaningful questions and create the space to allow those questions to land inside of you. The environment shapes the answers that come. So in essence, the people that come to us from all over the planet are coming because they have been doing something for a period of time, and they have reached a point where they know deep down there is something. And I'm reluctant to say more, because I don't think more is the answer, but there's something different for them. There's just a fulfillment. There's something that they just haven't quite got to. And in essence, if I could distill that down, is what you're doing right now, whether it's professionally or personally, is it a reflection of the essence of who you are, or is it just something that you do and have done, and it's worked to a point, but you've reached a point where money is not your primary focus. You're actually searching for meaning, and you want to make a bigger impact. My work, essentially, if you're trying to drive a business and grow a business, that's great. When you're ready to start wanting to make a bigger impact than you're currently making, that's when I want people to come to me. So impact essentially is the thing that I care most about, and if I can play a small part in unlocking what that is for other people. So if I distill it down to words, it's purpose and potential. That's essentially what I do.
Tell me a little bit about the soul set process, this modality. I hear you talk about it. How does that fit into the overarching structure and methodology that you follow with the people that come and visit you?
Yeah, I suppose if I distill down what soul set is, it's intuition. I mean, our mind, our thoughts are an extension of our mind. Is what we feel is an extension of our soul. And what I encourage people to do is to bring a little bit of that feeling, that thing that a lot of us are trying to avoid more and more and more in the world. So how we basically bring soul set to the table is examining. What we do is, depending on the experience that people come on, but sometimes we'll actually shine a light back into your past and look at the things that have happened to you, both positive and negative, that have shaped who you are today, that have shaped a lot of your patterning, a lot of your beliefs, a lot of how you show up in the world. And essentially that's determining the future that you're going to create, whether you like it or not. And trying to get in touch with, emotionally what is going on in that landscape, and connect with things that bring you tremendous joy, not make sense here, but bring you tremendous joy, and actually start bringing that into your life. And what I find is clients of ours say, my business is growing, we're making more money, but I'm actually having more fun, or I'm doing things that actually bring a tremendous amount more meaning into my life, and I'm being able to monetize that in ways I couldn't imagine before.
You have a very large aggregate perspective on this, and meaning you've worked with a bunch of different entrepreneurs and leaders at different sizes and different industries, and then you've had this pretty unique vantage point on their journey, in the sense that you're watching them go from a point A to a point B, and you get to be front and center, not only watching it but playing a pretty important role facilitating it. So I'm kind of asking you a big question here, but what is the most profound observation or perspective shift that you have had about the entrepreneurial journey, watching this many people redefine their own right in front of you?
Yeah. The most fascinating thing has been to be able to witness that actually what they're building and what they've built is purely as a result of trauma. That actually somebody said, and I don't remember who first said this, but somebody said entrepreneurship is a trauma response. And I don't think there's a truer statement that's been made around entrepreneurs in the world. It doesn't make what they've done bad. It doesn't make it disingenuous. It doesn't make it dishonest. What it makes it is that it's coming from an origin that most of them don't even realize that this is where it's come from. So a couple of weeks ago, Benji, I was in prison, not for the reasons that some might think, but I was in prison to volunteer. And I've worked with these men who are going through a program of rehabilitation, who've demonstrated genuine remorse, regret, and want to assimilate in society and make good on what they've done, I suppose, wrong in society, if they get an opportunity to do so. And what I've noticed in there is that we do this exercise called Step to the Line, and you may or may not have heard of it, but basically we step across from somebody who's on the inside, an inmate, And basically, you step to the line if you associate with the following statements. And I'll read out a couple just off the top of my head from memory. Step to the line if you heard gunshots in your neighborhood before you were 5 years old. And almost every single inmate steps to the line, and almost every single volunteer. So we had 30 volunteers from the outside, 30 inmates from the inside. Step to the line if you grew up in a house that had books, many books in it as a kid, and almost every volunteer steps to the line and every inmate stays exactly where they are, and so on and so forth. It's not to justify the outcome and the behavior. It's not to say what they did was okay. It's to begin to understand the circumstances in which they grew up and the circumstances in which we grew up is ultimately the defining factor in their behavior and their outcome, not other things that we would like to separate us. Entrepreneurship is exactly the same. We build entire communities because we were lonely. We build entire empires because I'm still waiting for my dad to tell me he loves me and he's proud of me. We play at the World Cup for football or soccer, not because we truly picked that sport, but we're still trying to prove somebody right or somebody wrong. And that motivation will get you so far. The problem is it'll make you successful, but it will always, always, always leave you empty. And at some point in that journey, you can stop running from what you don't want and stop and say, okay, I've outrun that. I've just enough money in the bank that I don't have to worry about poverty where I've come from. Do I want to continue to build and scale and make more money? Or do I want to reframe it? Say, yeah, that's okay to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. But do I want to do it in terms of the way I want to do it, on my terms? Negotiating, the things that I want to create. And the biggest challenge is most of what I see is based on some sort of trauma. And then it's basically stopping and saying, you've outrun that. You don't need to keep running from that anymore because it's exhausting. It's unsustainable. And it brings you in directions that often don't align with who you are. Let's switch it and see where you really want to go and see what happens in the wake of that and what happens to the people around you as you pursue that.
I'm thinking of a voice in my head that I hear a lot, which is, it's actually a sentence, and it's, I'll show you. I will show you. And that is usually when I feel wronged by someone or doubted by someone or rejected by someone or something, things don't go my way in a situation the way that I hoped they would, I default towards this I'll show you response. And I find it, to be honest, Philip, like pretty motivating. Like it definitely works. Are you saying that just works for kind of a flurry of activity, but it's maybe not the most sustainable? Is the I'll show you voice kind of the trauma response thing that you're talking about? That's
100%.
Okay.
100%. And thank you for the honesty. I love it. And you're right. It works from a data point of view. So imagine, let's just play a game, and I'm going to make it slightly silly, but it's not silly at all. Imagine someone says to you, imagine you have a kind of you're in love with somebody and you kind of break up and it's kind of messy. And this girl you're really in love with, you're so embarrassed, you're so ashamed, you get nasty, you say something, you say, well, you're X, Y, and Z. And she turns to you and goes, you know what? I don't even know why I dated you. You're never going to find anybody. You're never going to get married. And you take that I'll show you into life. Here's what's going to happen. You're too busy trying to show somebody that you're going to get married. You're overlooking the person that you're marrying. You're not seeing some red flags. You're excusing certain behaviors, misalignment in terms of values, because you're too busy trying to show somebody else wrong. So you get this lady, you marry this lady, you walk down the road, but you walk past the cafe that your ex is working in. You don't walk the other side of the street. You make sure you pause, you drop your wallet, you try to find it so she can look out the window and you can look in the window and go, there you go, I showed you. And in my experiences, that energy will get you the data. You got married, you showed her, but then you look in the mirror a couple of years later and go, and why did I marry this person? And what was it about them? We're not even that aligned. And the issues start to creep into the relationship because you did it from a place of reaction rather than relationship. You're in reaction to the situation rather than a relationship to the situation.
So this metaphor works for business too. It's like the business version of that is, some family member when you're really young says you're stupid and you're not going to amount to anything, or a teacher because you have bad grades or because you're jittery in class makes fun of you publicly and you're humiliated, and you take that story and you weave it into basically a 20-year career building a business that is objectively successful, subjectively miserable. And that's the fine line that I think a lot of your work is kind of getting to the heart of.
I think that's a brilliant observation. It's objectively successful. And maybe it's not even subtly miserable. Maybe it's just you've normalized it, that it's fine. It's fine. You get to go away the weekends. It affords you the lifestyle. This is a line that a lot of people say, but okay, I may not love what I do, but it affords me a lifestyle that, Philip, I love. And I can give money to this person, that person, and everything else. And it's a great story. I find when people are doing that, they're trying to sell to me. They're trying to sell the concept that they shouldn't change. I'm not asking them to burn down the empire. I'm asking them to realize that actually maybe they're alive, but they're not fully alive. Maybe there's something that lies just beyond what you're currently doing that will. Here's my experience, Benji. When I can help, and when I say I help, I think what I do is a small tweak. A lot of my clients think I'm the mecca when it comes to this. Yeah, and I'm not a guru, but I'm really good at helping them tweak certain things. And when they make the change, not me, what happens is there's an aliveness that comes into their body, into their soul, into their mind. And I mean, I've been through this journey myself. And I challenge anyone to say, I'm not aligned to what I do right now, but I spend years doing shit that I thought I was aligned to, and I told myself a lie. Oh no, I love this and I love that and I love it, and I didn't. Here's what happens. When you help somebody come alive, they can't help but bring people around them alive. And whether it's their children or where, and our kids, our wives, our husbands, our boyfriends, our girlfriends pay the price for our misalignment every single day. How you know you're misaligned is when you're an asshole at home. How you know you're misaligned is when you just lose your shit when there's no reason to lose it. You snap, you whatever. There's something you're not saying. There's something you're not doing. There's something you're not being. That's all that's going on. And you can say it's money is the stressor, or this is the stressor, or the traffic is getting at me. Those things ordinarily wouldn't get you to the same extent as they are if you're in alignment with who you are.
Ego isn't all bad. And I might hear, I think people might be surprised when I say that, but my understanding of ego is that it does sometimes get a bad rap. And by that, I mean, you do need, there's got to be some kernel of ego and self-belief. And frankly, to use a word that's not popular, self-centeredness, to have the gusto to get a business off the ground, to have the self-confidence to move something. And like, it's on some level, it's what drives us. Self-interest is kind of what makes the world go round. It's kind of what drives capitalism and the whole system that we live inside of. So I'm in the camp that, okay, in many, many instances, ego expresses itself quite unhealthily. But what are your thoughts on this? And can you maybe give us help us develop a healthier understanding and relationship with our own egos?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're doing is you're not vilifying it today, which is actually lovely because 99.9% of the world is vilifying ego. Most people say they don't have an ego, and they're the dangerous ones. The ones that do have an ego and say they have an ego and are aware of it and are conscious of it and conscious of how it plays a role and its need for oxygen. They're the ones that are really equipped. So I've no real black and white around ego, but I guess if I think about it, I use these mountain analogies because I'm a very visual person. So I feel that I use the analogy of three mountains, and I think this is essentially our evolution, whether we like it or not. And I think mountain one is about us. I think it's most of us make it about us. It's about our happiness. It's about our wealth. It's about our path. It's about paying our bills, and there is nothing wrong with that. Mountain two, in my experience, particularly in a business context, Mountain two tends to be where you move into something where you start to want to build something with other people. So it's about us. So mountain one is about me. Mountain two is about us, which is about creating a culture, bringing people together. And, maybe you build a bigger team. Maybe you contribute to the local community. Maybe you cut checks to build a farm or an orphanage or whatever it happens to be. And again, it absolutely mirrors my own individual path. But you realize that actually a lot of what we're doing is still about us, and it's doing the things that we want to do, which is absolutely fine. And then there's this opportunity, which most people die on the second mountain, or they overstay their welcome on the second mountain. The third mountain is about them. When you basically turn around, and if you think about any successful person in history, most of them get to a point where they amass enough wealth to realize, holy shit, this hasn't brought me the kind of joy I thought it would. I'm going to start giving it all away. But the cost that they've often incurred, both personally and relationship-wise, in the pursuit of that wealth has sometimes not been worth it. Okay? It just hasn't been worth it. They start giving away. My job is to try to wake people up sooner. So in the case of myself, selfishly, it was all about me. It was all about us, me and us. And now my job, and there are occasions when I get scarce and I get fearful. I get the mirror and it comes really close to home. It's all about me again. I don't think I'm as successful as I should be. I mean, look at Benji. He's got more followers than me. Oh my God, Benji's making more money than me. Why am I not as good as him? And I get that scarce contraction. I'm in my head, not in my body. But there is this opportunity to essentially transcend into a place where you're actually in the third mountain, the third phase of your life is all about other people. And that is, I think that is ultimately where you're going to be at your happiest. But the misconception is I need to make enough money in the middle mountain to give myself the freedom to go and do that.
Is that a misconception? Because look, I got to tell you, you can understand why people feel that way. It's like when I achieve escape velocity is a term I love. I've got enough that I can do whatever the I want. Sorry for swearing. Then I'll become generous. So, and you put yourself in your shoes of a business owner. That makes a lot of sense. So why is that a misconception?
It makes sense until it doesn't make sense. And here's where it doesn't make sense. If they say, I'm going to spend the next 3 years and I'm going to escape velocity is the language you use. I'm going to get to that threshold. What you'll find is that something will change. The timing's not right. There's not a buyer for my business right now. I just need to get it to just another pay. I can get another million off the table or another 100 grand off the table. The goalpost keeps changing. Or here's another pattern that I guarantee you that your community fall into is, let me put a manager in place and then it'll all be fine. And then the manager doesn't work out and they find themselves back in the business again. The reason that happens, it's not because the manager is shit, it's because they picked a shit person, because deep down they don't want to escape the business because they don't know who they are beyond the business. They haven't taken the time to reimagine who they could be at their core, in the same way that an inmate sometimes repeats a crime when they get out, not because they want to repeat crime, because they don't know how to be in society. They're safer back in what they know, so they create it. They repeat a crime or create a new crime just so they can get back to jail, to familiarity. They get back to that base that they understood that they've been in for far too long. So it does make sense until it begins to not make sense at all. And people often say to me is, well, it's easy for you to this third mountain business and passion and everything else because you've got enough money to do it. And I said, so rather than making an assumption, why don't you ask me? Because when I made a decision to go from the second to the third mountain, I was underwater to hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt at the Great Recession. I owned real estate that was underwater. I had banks chasing me. I had so much shame. I had so much guilt. I was so fucking desperate. I was underwater, and I just, from a pure place of pure desperation, Benji. I'd love to say it was pure inspiration. It wasn't. Desperation. With tears rolling down my face in my mother's kitchen, my wife said, I'm not going back to Canada. And I said, I'm going to F and do this. And she said, what? This coaching thing. I wanted to do it my whole life. Like deep down, I knew it. The signposts were there. We're brought kicking and screaming to the thing we're destined to do in this earth. And the thing we're destined to do is the thing that we do naturally. Hence, it's so difficult for us to put a value on it, monetary value on the thing that we do naturally, because it's just a thing we do naturally. And yet the world is screaming for that gift that you have. So I did it at a time where I was underwater, and I will never allow someone to tell me I'm only doing this, and only did it at a point where I had enough money in the bank, because that's...
I love metaphors. People that listen to the podcast know that I speak in metaphors a lot, and I love mountains. And this one really, and I've done enough hiking and mountaineering to know this. So here's the thing: when you get to the top of one mountain, you see the second mountain, and you go, "Well, that looks like a pretty nice peak. It's a little higher. It's a little prettier. I bet the view's better. Let's get over to that one." Now, it's obvious, but the first thing you realize pretty quickly is, I got to go down this entire thing into a valley. Like, it's not like there's a chairlift from one peak to the next one that just gets you. There's often a pretty big sort of like go down and then back up. Call it a roller coaster, call it whatever. The metaphor is pretty obvious. And just in general, can you speak? You shared a little bit about your own story, which is incredible and beautiful, but maybe turn that into a lesson. Like for people that are, I don't care if they're on the first or they're on the second, but they need to get from one to the next. What should they be prepared for mentally, spiritually, even to some degree financially, to make that jump from one mountain to the next? What's in store for them if they make that move?
Well, there's so much in that question that to unpack. The first thing I want to say is there is no right mountain, just to be clear. I don't want people listening to this now or in the future going, oh, the first mountain, oh, I'm on the second mountain. There is no judgment. It is, you are where you are, but there's an opportunity if you want to begin to move into the next phase. So I think a lot of people are very attached to what they're doing right now in the way in which they're doing it. So I think it's about decoupling from what we're doing right now, letting go of the narratives and the stories that we're telling ourselves. I agree with you. I think one of the challenges in the world today is people scale a mountain. And yes, you see that in a business context, a financial goal, whatever that happens to be. They get to the top of that mountain, they look across the horizon, they see a sexier, cooler, nicer mountain. It's more green, it's more snowy, it's more whatever. And they go, oh, I just climbed the wrong mountain. So patterns repeat itself, and we continue to climb the wrong mountains looking for a different result over and over and over and over again. So to me, I mean, I'm not even sure exactly how to answer that question in terms of what people are in store for, because it's all so deeply personal. But I think the first thing is to be unattached to where you are right now. A lot of people say to me, oh, I'd love to do something different, but I've got a lifestyle right now, and I've got a business, and I've got a team, and they tell themselves all these stories that the world needs them so badly, and yet if they die tomorrow morning, the world's going to go on, and they use those attachments to kind of make sure that they don't have to change. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a business owner, and he got to a point where he just wasn't happy, and he built a really, really successful business, definitely on a second mountain. But the reason he came to me was this deep curiosity. Something was just shaking inside him. Something was just getting a little bit loose. And he said to me, well, Philip, I want to talk to you about, meaning and purpose and everything else. And I finally just said to him, would you sell your current business? And he said, oh, well, I don't know if I want to sell it. And I said, okay, cool. I said, why are you so attached? No, I'm not at all. And I said, well, if you weren't attached, you would have said, I'm not planning on selling my business, but I'm open to the conversation. And he said, well, I love my people. And I said, I'm sure you do. And if you love your people so much, why don't you just give them all the money? Why don't you sell the business and give them all the money if they're so incredible and so beautiful and so brilliant? And he said, why are you being an ass? And I said, because I don't believe what you're telling me. And he said, well, I love the industry. And I said, no, you love your family. You don't love widgets, or you don't love plastic, or whatever the industry was. And then finally I said, so what are you really scared of? And he was scared of two things. He was scared of what was next. And what he was really scared of is if he left the business and the business did a hockey stick, as in it grew at a huge rate. As soon as I said that, I said, are you okay walking away from this team? He goes, oh yeah, they're so competent. I said, let's try something on. You leave, and within a year, the business doubles. And he just went, and I said, what's going on there? And he goes, oh, you McKernan, that struck a chord. That struck a chord, because that would shatter my whole identity as the guy who's brought the business to this point. So there was so many other things going on for him under the surface that he was completely unaware of. And therefore he was making decisions or indecisions from a place of pure blindness.
What a great conversation. Had you been asking me those questions, I would have also said, why are you being you really, really cornered him. He's pinned.
No, but here's the thing. I don't actually get joy from being but being, if you want to qualify it as I actually think it's deep care. It's such deep care. No, I know you are. And I was the one that said being or he said I was and I agree with you. I agree with the principle that I am. However, we need more in our life. We need people who are calling us on something and stress testing things that we're telling ourselves. Because if people keep going, you're right, Benji, Philip, you're right. Actually, I think you're right. Nor do we need people negative all the time, but we need people to challenge us from a deep place of curiosity. And when he was saying it to me, I just didn't buy it. Subsequently, he sold his business. He made a lot more money than he would have because he planned a really good exit, not an exit of sabotage. And he has found joy doing something that he never imagined that he would do. It's not perfect, I'm sure, but that wasn't available to him in his thinking up to that point.
Someone might say, if they listen to this podcast or they've heard you speak from stage, they're familiar with your work on some level, you know this better than anyone, Philip. Like, someone might make the case that this is pretty touchy-feely, and they go, wow, must be a luxury to find some purpose and blah, blah, blah. I wonder if you can just make a more compelling case for why and how finding your purpose isn't just about the subjective experience of your leadership journey or your business journey, but also makes like a measurable impact on growth, on retention, on profitability. Where I'm going with this is I'm trying to appeal for even the most hardened, cynical listener who goes, "Well, I don't really buy any of this shit." Like, what? Let's make a performance-based argument for this, even if they claim that they don't care about the subjective part, which of course we know they do. But I want to just speak to some data or some numbers or a little bit more of a measurable approach for the people who only connect with stuff like this through that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I probably have more questions back for you on that, just to qualify that even more. But it's interesting that imagine you're sitting around at a dinner party and someone talks about homeschooling. The people that in my experience, that object to homeschooling the most are the people that aren't doing it and have no experience of it. And deep down, the more they object, my experience is the more they actually would desperately want to do or have the freedom to homeschool and would love the courage to homeschool. And therefore, by annihilating the idea of homeschooling, that they can reject that from their own psyche. So when it comes to convincing people who don't want to be convinced of the power of purpose and living in more alignment, I honestly, and this, I'm going to attempt to dig into this answer with you. I'm not trying to be either arrogant or escape the question. It's not a conversation I used to try to wake people up who didn't want to be woken up. And I found myself getting absolutely exhausted because there was 20 people behind those 3 people or 50 people going, "Hey, I'm ready. Philip, can you just challenge me or work with me?" So I'm not going to sit here and try to sell this. At the same time, I appreciate the question that you're trying to help me create some data to help the cynics or the people who are rejecting this to see the power in this. I can't. Well, there's a real life example is Dan Martell. I don't know if you know Dan. Do you know Dan Martell?
I do. We work in the same building, and I've interviewed him. I see him from time to time. I wouldn't consider him a friend, but he knows my name, and I bump into him all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dan is a great example. Now, but I want to qualify this very clearly, as I'm not sitting here trying to take ownership of Dan's journey, but I certainly played a part in it. And the very first time I met Dan was at an event where he walked up to me and he said to me, "What could you do for me?" I don't know if you heard this story, Benji. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "If you coached me, what can you do for me?" And I took a step back and I looked at him, and he's quite a towering individual. He's quite tall and broad. And I looked at him and I said, "What part of you thinks I give a about you?" And he stood back and he looked at me in a little bit weird. And he reminded me of this story. I'd totally forgotten this, by the way. And he goes, "Excuse me?" And I just said, "Dan, if we work together, the whole focus would be about how you can make a bigger impact in the world." And in that moment, I said, he's gone and I'm never going to have him as a client or as a friend or anything else, or he's going to step in. No, I wasn't consciously thinking about that. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks, 4 weeks later, he was in Peru with me on a giving trip. And he said, and I quote, "It changed everything for him." As in, started to help him change his perspective in terms of the impact that he can make in the world. And Dan has gone off and done amazing things, and he's grown his own life and his business. And I played a tiny role, not a significant role necessarily in that journey. You tell me the return on investment that he has. He's got millions and millions and millions of followers. He's written a best-selling book. He's flying in a private jet. He's got his supercars, he's whatever. And he's doing that, impacting people's lives. There is one example of a measure of financial, and I can't tell you straight off the top of my head whether he's blissfully happy every moment of every time. I don't know. But there is one real life example. Is that an extreme example? Perhaps, but is it an example nonetheless? Absolutely.
I would love to talk about a roadmap for our listeners to begin finding more purpose in their own lives. And you've got a framework, and you speak and you write, and you've got these epic retreats. I almost am wanting to ask you for like the DIY kit, the at-home kit. It's like, if somebody can't come to the retreat, like, let's maybe just give some instruction, some practical exercises, some pointers, some mindset shifts. Like, if someone is listening to this and they're going, "Philip is bang on. I'm sitting in this business and it's great, but it's not fully connecting with my soul, and I've never been called out this way before, and now I see it, and I actually do want to start making some movement towards this." How do we go about doing that? Like, what are the actual steps for someone who's connecting with this conversation but maybe feeling stuck and not knowing where to begin?
looking for a systematic approach, a one size fits all. I'm not making fun of you, Benji, but I get the question. It's very, very difficult to do that, but I can certainly give some people some pointers. Number one is everybody should get therapy. Everybody should get therapy. If you don't, you're selfish because you are carrying stuff from your past and you'd think it's in your past and it's not. It's in your everyday presence and you're just passing it on to the next generation if you've got kids, or you're spreading it to people around you. And every single human being I've ever met has trauma. And so many people I've met don't think they have been traumatized in their past. We all have trauma. So number one is get therapy. I don't need to sell books. And even if I sell books, they don't make money, as you and I probably both know. But there's a book behind me called One Last Talk. Buy the One Last Talk book and go through the process. And the process itself is both therapeutic and very, very powerful in helping you understand what you give a about in the world. And be open to what drives you nuts. Be open to what makes you really angry, and be open to what makes you really sad. And be open to what brings you so alive. And I want to be really clear. This is not about burning down your business, selling your business, shutting it down, giving it away, or handing it to your management team. This is about, there is something inside of you that if all you ever do every single day is make phone cases or widgets or belts for jeans or whatever it is, if that's all you do every day, in my humble experience, you're depriving the world of something deeper. It does not mean you need to go out and make a vocation out of it. But if there's something that stirs your soul, something that stirs, find a way to do it even in your part-time. Lean into it and be curious. It could be a talk, it could be a book, it could be something more significant, or it could be something really simple about sharing the story about your past in your company itself, to your staff. And somebody said to me recently, but I'd never share something vulnerable to my staff. And I said, why not? He says, I have to appear to be strong. And I said, my God, what a burden that you carry and what a burden you're giving to your staff, that they see you on a pedestal and you're not. And allowing them to see the human in you allows you to see the human in them and allows them to feel less insecure in your company. So therapy, read the book. What else? I think the biggest thing for me is decide whether you're willing to keep your head down and be the way you are and continue the way you are, or whether you are unprepared to do that. And the determination you have in that regard. Let me just step back for a second. So when I complain about the school system, the single biggest complaint I get from people is, okay, well, what's the alternative? And I go, okay, but we've skipped a step. Do you believe there's a problem in the school system? Well, there might be, but it's not that easy to change. Well, what would you do, Philip? And I go, no. If enough of us can agree that the schooling system is archaic and doesn't work for our children, we will find a solution. Great example of that is COVID. As soon as the world woke up and said, okay, we have a problem here. Some might agree with COVID, disagree with COVID. Let's assume it was a legitimate problem. Look how the world came together. Look at the money that was raised and look at the amount of solutions that was created in jig time, in historical, like blink of an eye. Look what we were able to achieve. If enough people realize, and for me, Benji, when I woke up that day in that kitchen for a place of desperation, there was no roadmap necessary. There was no stepping stone. I just said, I'm going to do this effing coaching business. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I was in a foreign country called Canada. I had no connections. I was under the water to hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And there was an awakening inside of me, and it was driven by pure pain almost. There's an awakening that needs to happen. It's less about the steps and more about the awakening inside of us, that we have a gift, we have something to give the world, and I'm not going to leave this world without at least experimenting with it. And once that happens, all the steps and all the students or the teachers, they all arrive, they'll all emerge, and they're easy to find.
I love this. This is such an interesting place to kind of close, because you've mentioned this moment in your life a couple times and you made the switch. I wonder if you can actually just talk a little bit about, some will call it providence. Some say, when the student is ready, the master arrives, or whatever. There's all these great, sort of sayings that speak to the same idea around when life brings you to your knees, often not for the first time. It's like the second, third, or fourth time, and you kind of, like in your case, out of desperation, have to admit that this is what you're being called to do. When you make that decision and then the first few steps, I wonder if you can speak from your own experience, but also from the experience watching people go through this so many times. What kind of signals or clues does God or the universe, whatever term works for you, start to show you to say, hey, keep going. Hey, I want to listen. The water's warm. Let me encourage you to take another step. Because in my experience, if you're paying attention, and look, let's be honest, most people aren't. But if you're paying attention, you'll start to see these little signs, and it can be very, very trippy sometimes. And I wonder what that was like for you and what you've observed, and just tell our listeners, hey, if they take the plunge, so to speak, what can they expect on the other side of it?
So imagine there's a stepping stone across the river, and the river on the other side represents a better place, whatever that is. My experience is that when we start to awaken that actually we've got a gift that we have not executed or experimented or played with in the world, we have a tendency to look at the stepping stone in front of us that's the slipperiest, and we jump onto that. And I'll give you an example, and it's pure sabotage. When somebody, and I've literally seen this, people have said, oh, actually, I really want to coach. I'd love to do more speaking. I'd love to do storytelling. I'd love to write a book or whatever. Okay, well, just take one client. Do you know what they do, Benji? They go out and they engage their brother, their cousin, their mother, or their father, or their sister. The person that's one of the closest people to them, not because they're close and they'll say yes, but because they know that person's not going to listen to them, and they're going to validate that actually they shouldn't be a coach and they're not good enough. What it comes down to is two things why people don't succeed in doing something they want to do. They don't believe they're good enough at it, and they don't believe they deserve it. And we will go out into the world and we'll seek to validate that very thing. If they don't make that mistake, which most of us do, if we have that belief inside of us, we will find a way to screw it up, to prove that we're not good enough. If we get beyond that, what I have found with people is, and I've walked people through this so many times, is just one solid, simple experimentation. So imagine there's somebody listening to this that goes, I'd love to help somebody, but I don't know where to start. Imagine you're 45 years and you don't know how to start. You're 45 years old. And all I say is go back to what was the most challenging period of your time? Well, when I was 16, I was really challenged. Great, find a 16-year-old. Go to a high school and speak, which I would recommend to everybody. It's one of the most extraordinary things you'll do, because you can adults, you can't teenagers. They'll see right through you. So it forces you to be absolutely transparent, at a transparency that you've probably never experienced before. Go find a 16-year-old, open your doors to them, bring them into your organization, give them a job, and mentor them. But I'm not a mentor. I don't know how to mentor. No, just allow them to see your life, answer some questions. And I guarantee you, if you help them overcome or fast track through the pain you yourself experienced, it will bring you an aliveness that I promise you've never had in a day's work in your entire life. I guarantee it. You go to my website, you look for the word guarantee, and I guarantee you will not find the word guarantee. And you will wake up and go, oh my God, this is like, I just live for Wednesday morning when Charlie comes into my office at 9. And I just want him to be there every day. And then you say, okay, well, what about another Charlie? What about a Mary? What about bringing a small group of 16-year-olds in from the local college or area that they're underprivileged or whatever, and before you have this little mentoring group, and then suddenly you just see where it goes. That's it. Experiment. Pick the period of time that was the most challenging for you, the thing that was most challenging for you, and go help somebody do that. Because if you don't, here's the other thing. You'll never fully heal. You can do all the therapy, you can do all the MDMA, you can do all the retreats in the world. But the last missing step for 99% of people who never fully heal is that they haven't gone back out into the world and taken the thing they themselves suffered with and helped other people move through that, navigate through that, or go beyond that. And when you do that, that's the final step of healing. It is the most complete, beautiful thing you'll ever do in this world.
Philip, I can't thank you enough for what you've shared with our community in the talk we did the other day. We had so much incredible feedback after. I can't thank you enough for this conversation today. Where can people connect with you, follow you, learn more about the work you do? Just links, addresses, I don't know, social media. What's kind of like your digital footprint?
I think philipmckernan.com is probably the easiest, and then Philip_McKernan on Instagram. I'm becoming more active there, but philipmckernan.com is the best way to connect.
Thank you, Philip.
Yeah. Thanks, Benji. Appreciate it.